They didn't break you, but they sure tried. Now they're choking on the silence they once mocked. Chosen One, here's something they'll never admit. Their actions were never careless mistakes. No, they were calculated, sharp, cold, and they thought you wouldn't notice, but you did. And now, the same silence you once held, it's screaming in their ears like a siren in the night. Psychologists have confirmed something terrifying. People who harm others on purpose with no guilt often feel no reason to stop. They're like wolves in a room full of sheep, until one day they bite the wrong one. And that one, chosen one, was you. Imagine this for a moment. You're walking through a hallway full of mirrors, each one showing a version of you, bruised, tired, misunderstood. But now the glass is cracking, not around your reflection, but theirs. Their masks are falling, and all their intentions are now visible for what they truly were, venom covered in smiles. They didn't show mercy because they never had it in them to begin with. But here's the twist. The same universe they mocked. It's delivering consequences with the precision of a storm guided by lightning. And now, Chosen One. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe button to help spread this truth to more souls out there. It's not just a click, it's part of a mission. You're not alone. You're part of a force that stands for truth, clarity, and justice. Thank you for being here, Chosen One. Together, we spread the light. Let's dive in. They didn't just hurt you. They studied you. They timed your reactions. They tested your limits like it was a game. And when you didn't break the way they hoped, that's when the real cruelty kicked in. See, they couldn't handle your strength, so they tried to make you doubt it. But here's the part they never saw coming. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. While they were busy plotting, you were observing. While they laughed, you were learning. And while they thought you were alone, the universe was already aligning justice on your behalf. What you went through wasn't just bad luck. It was intentional, carefully designed, the kind of pain that hits where no one can see. And still, you stood. That's what haunts them now. You didn't fold. You didn't crumble. You turned the fire into fuel. Now they're facing the music. But it's not a gentle song. It's the echo of every lie they told, bouncing back louder than they ever imagined. Life is hitting them with a force they can't explain. And that's not coincidence. That's consequence. And you've entered a different phase, not just recovery, but realization. You're starting to see how none of it was random. You were picked, not to be broken, but to be built. What they meant for harm became your awakening. And now, everything they tried to steal, your peace, your confidence, your light, is returning to you in waves. This isn't revenge, it's balance. It's justice flowing through time, returning to its rightful place. The universe doesn't forget, Chosen One. It remembers every tear you didn't let fall, every insult you swallowed, every fake smile you forgave, and it repays. So let them talk, let them pretend, let them wear masks and throw shade, because deep down they know the truth. They know they showed no mercy, and now they're learning what happens when that same mercy is withheld from them. Stay strong, stay centered, and most of all, stay watching. Because the tables haven't just turned, they've flipped. And now, every move they make is under a sky that sees everything. The storm has arrived, and this time, it's not after you. Before we go further, Chosen One, take a second to breathe. You've already survived what was meant to destroy you. That alone deserves recognition. If this message is hitting something real inside you, Drop 777 in the comments to claim the power in your pain and mark the start of their reckoning. And if you feel moved, support the force behind this truth by leaving a super thanks, no matter the amount. It fuels the fire to keep exposing what's been done in the dark. This mission takes time, energy, and spirit. Your support keeps it alive. And now, let's go deeper. Piece by piece, truth by truth. What they did was no accident, and the storm they're facing now, it's no coincidence. Stay with me. If you're truly one of the chosen, you won't just want to hear this. You'll feel it, calling you to the end. Let's begin. Number 1. This wasn't a slip. It was a setup. You were never meant to walk away whole. They weren't careless. They were calculated. You weren't caught in their storm. You were the target. Let's get something straight right now. They didn't accidentally hurt you. They didn't say those things out of a bad mood or act that way because of some momentary stress. No, what they did was deliberate, planned, and precise, like a sniper lining up a shot. They didn't trip into betrayal, they executed it with surgical intention. And the worst part, they never expected you to survive it. Chosen one, you weren't just dealing with broken people. You were dealing with architects of pain, experts in manipulation, engineers of chaos. They didn't throw random punches. They studied you like a test subject, measured your reactions, marked your triggers. Every silence, every insult, every cold glance was part of a psychological playbook they'd been perfecting long before you ever caught on. They smiled to your face and carved you behind your back, not clumsily, not emotionally, calm, cold, strategic, like a surgeon with a scalpel, not a butcher with a knife. People might tell you, oh, maybe they didn't know what they were doing, but deep down, you know they did. You felt the way they watched you crack, how they fed off your confusion, how they shifted blame so smoothly you started questioning your own sanity. That wasn't immaturity. That was emotional warfare, and you were in the trenches with someone who never intended to show mercy, because mercy would have meant seeing you as human. And to them, you were never that. You were a mirror they couldn't stand to look into. So they tried to shatter it. Now here's the part that hits the hardest. They didn't want your pain. They wanted your breakdown. They weren't just trying to hurt you. They were trying to erase you, piece by piece, day by day, until there was nothing left of the powerful soul you once were. Still wondering why it felt so organized, why it unfolded like a script, because it was. They wrote scenes in their head before acting them out in real time. Isolation, that was a tactic. Public humiliation, a move, gaslighting, a cover-up. They weren't improvising. They were directing a play where you were cast as the villain and they got to be the victim. And the audience? Friends, family, co-workers. They were fed just enough lies to doubt you, but never enough to suspect the truth. You weren't just attacked, you were framed. And you know what's crazy? They celebrated behind closed doors when they thought they had you cornered, thought they'd finished the job, thought you'd break, stay broken, and quietly disappear. But look at you now. You didn't disappear. You evolved. You didn't crumble. You calcified. They were looking for cracks, but they ended up creating armor. You didn't just survive the storm. You became it. And now, the very tactics they used to destroy you are coming back with interest. Every lie, every betrayal, every mask they wore is catching fire, because the universe saw everything they thought they got away with. Let me say this clear. You were not the fool. You were the test. A test they failed, miserably. Because real power isn't loud. It's not screaming or fighting for attention. Real power watches quietly. Real power endures. And when it strikes, it doesn't miss. Now they're the ones living in the quiet, but not the peaceful kind, the kind that screams with guilt at 3 a.m., the kind that replays the truth they tried to bury. You see, Chosen One, they thought the silence you gave them was weakness. But it was the warning before the collapse. And now, that collapse is here. The repercussions are real, and they're running from a storm they summoned with their own hands, still doubting if it was intentional. Ask yourself this: if it wasn't planned, why did it happen repeatedly? Why did they always know just where to cut? Why did the apologies never match the damage? Why did they move so quickly to protect their image, but never once protect your heart? Because this wasn't a mistake. It was a mission. And here's the deeper truth: they never believed you'd rise. That's why they hit so low. They assumed you'd stay there, but they forgot one thing: chosen ones don't stay buried. We grow from it. We resurrect. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment you thought it was over, it was just you gathering fuel. And now, you're the wildfire they can't outrun. They made their moves with no mercy. Now, they're learning what it means to be on the other end of that equation. They're realizing that what goes around doesn't just come back. It comes back multiplied. So, let them whisper. Let them play innocent. Let them pretend like nothing happened. But you and I both know the reckoning has begun. And you're not here for revenge. You're here for truth, for justice, for that sweet balance the universe always delivers in due time. Chosen One, don't waste your breath trying to explain the depth of what you went through. You lived it. That's all the proof you need. And those who really see you, they feel it without words. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a bad day. This was a war, and they lost. Number 1. They dressed up cruelty and kindness, and you were the target the whole time. They didn't scream. They smiled. That's what made it dangerous. The most terrifying monsters don't hide in the dark. They hide behind charm. You weren't losing your mind. You were just being slowly dismantled by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Real evil doesn't come with fangs and fire. It comes wearing perfume and asking how your day went. Now let's talk about the part no one ever wants to admit. The kind of cruelty that doesn't leave bruises on your skin, but scars on your soul. The most twisted part of what you went through. It looked normal. It looked calm, clean, controlled. They didn't throw chairs or punch walls. No, that would have been too obvious. Instead, they served poison in crystal glasses, smiling all the while. They turned manipulation into art. A performance, a soft-spoken horror movie that only you were forced to watch in silence. Imagine this for a second. You're standing in a room slowly filling with gas, but no one else can smell it. You try to speak, but they all say, "It looks fine to me." That was your life, slowly suffocating in plain sight while the world admired the person holding the match. They didn't rage. They cooled you down. They didn't attack. They drained you, like someone unplugging your soul a little at a time. And when you finally fell apart, they had the perfect line ready. Look how unstable they are. But they made you that way. Every word, every silence, every calculated moment of kindness followed by cold withdrawal. It was designed to confuse you, to make you question reality. And you did. Because you're human. You kept asking yourself, was it me? Was I too sensitive? Did I imagine it? Why does it feel so real but look so invisible to everyone else? Let me give you the answer you've been starving for. It wasn't you. It was never you. You were just the mirror they couldn't handle. so they shattered it and then blamed the glass for being sharp. They used your empathy against you. Your forgiveness became fuel for their games. Your silence, a green light. They wore fake faces to the world and sharpened their knives behind closed doors. And they were so good at it, even you started to believe their version of you. That's the cruelty. That's the quiet hell they created. No screams, just slow, silent unraveling. But you made it out. And now, the cracks in their perfect image are beginning to show. The same people they manipulated into believing you were the problem. They're starting to see the truth. The mask is slipping. The act is failing. And here's the part they never saw coming. The more they try to play innocent, the more exposed they become. Because the universe doesn't reward deception forever. Eventually, truth breaks through like sunlight under a locked door. Here's something that might shock you. They're not shaking because they feel bad. They're shaking because they feel cornered. Because the lies they built their safety on are collapsing. Because the truth, your truth, has become too loud to ignore. Imagine this, a magician who's run out of tricks in front of an audience that's finally paying attention. That's them. And they're sweating. Not because they're sorry, but because the show is over. You were never weak. You were just being hunted in a silent war by someone trained in psychological ambushes, someone who weaponized love, who dressed cruelty up as concern, who turned your healing into ammunition and your vulnerability into a checklist of where to strike next. But what they didn't plan for, what they never expected, was your resurrection. They thought they buried you in confusion, but instead they planted something they can't control. You didn't just survive, you learned, you saw the playbook. And now every page of that manipulation manual is burned into your memory, never to be used against you again. You're not the same version of yourself they tried to destroy. You're not naive anymore. You don't fall for smiles without soul. You don't entertain apologies laced with control. You know what real peace feels like now, and their name isn't on it. They're terrified of that, because the power they had over you only existed in your blindness. And now that you see them, really see them, they've lost everything. Power, control, access. Their game is over. And if you're wondering if they'll ever truly face what they did, just wait. Repercussions don't always come wrapped in revenge. Sometimes they come wrapped in silence, in isolation, in public exposure, in watching the very soul they tried to crush rise up and thrive without them. That's a punishment the ego can't swallow. Imagine this, a fire that refuses to go out even after they poured every lie, every betrayal, every smear campaign onto it. That's you now. That's your light. Untouchable, unshakable. And they know it, and they hate it. You see, they didn't want you gone. They wanted you broken. And now that you're not, now that you're standing, breathing, glowing with truth and clarity, they're haunted. Because every breath you take in peace is a reminder of the war they lost. So no, don't ever let anyone minimize what you went through. It wasn't just a toxic relationship or a difficult chapter. It was a psychological assassination attempt. It was a hit job, silent, strategic. And the fact that you're still here, that makes you dangerous. That makes you divine. Let them crumble under the weight of their own deception. You don't have to lift a finger. The universe is already doing the heavy work, peeling back layers, exposing truth, restoring balance. You've already won. Number 1, they turned your pain into a circus. Now they're the clowns on display. They didn't just hurt you, they stayed to watch the show. Here's the truth that's hard to swallow, but impossible to ignore. Your suffering wasn't a side effect. It was the main attraction. They didn't wince when you cried. They didn't pause when you broke. They leaned in, smiled, took mental notes. Your breakdowns were their binge-worthy entertainment, and every time you stumbled, that was just the next episode in a series they were addicted to. You weren't surrounded by people who wanted peace. You were surrounded by people who fed on pain, your pain. They didn't just witness your suffering, they savored it, and they'd never admit it. But behind those polite nods and fake concern, they were laughing. Laughing at your confusion, at your exhaustion, at the fact that you were still trying to make sense of what was never meant to make sense. Let's talk about this. Studies show that people with narcissistic or sadistic tendencies often find emotional distress in others oddly satisfying. It gives them a sense of control, power, like they're the puppet master and you're just dancing. Imagine this. You're drowning in deep waters, crying out, flailing your arms, but instead of throwing a rope, they pull up a lawn chair and sip their drink. That's what they did. And then they had the nerve to say, "Why are you being so dramatic?" You might still be wondering, was I really that weak? Did I make it easy for them? Why didn't I see it sooner? But hear this loud and clear. You weren't weak. You were human. You were kind, loyal, trusting. And they twisted those very qualities into weapons. They saw your strength and felt small. So they chipped away, bit by bit, hoping you'd finally fall apart. But you didn't. And now, the stage has flipped. The lights are on them now. Their show is cancelled. Their mask is cracked. And the world is beginning to see exactly who was who. The same eyes that once watched you fall are now watching them face the repercussions. And this time, you're not the one hurting. You're healing. And they're finally feeling what they once applauded. Number 1. They treated you like a lab rat. Now they're caught in their own trap. You weren't breaking down. You were being broken apart by design. Let's make this plain. You weren't just a person to them. You were a project, an experiment. They didn't love you. They monitored you. They watched how you responded when they gave just enough affection to spark hope, then pulled it away like bait on a hook. You weren't in a relationship. You were in a psychological lab, and they were wearing the white coat, scribbling notes while slowly turning up the pressure. It wasn't random. It wasn't confusion. This was deliberate emotional engineering. They didn't want connection, they wanted control. And the way to control someone isn't always through violence. Sometimes it's through chaos. 1 minute they poured praise on you, made you feel safe. The next, they withdrew, ignored or punished you with silence. It wasn't clumsiness, it was method, a manipulation loop. A twisted science of push-pull behavior designed to break your identity down into pieces they could rearrange at will. Psychology backs this up. It's called intermittent reinforcement, a tactic often used by manipulators to hook their target emotionally by rewarding and punishing unpredictably. It keeps the victim chasing validation, stuck in a cycle that slowly destroys their sense of self. Imagine this. You're in a maze, and just when you think you're close to finding your way out, the walls shift. That's how it felt, didn't it? You kept trying harder, giving more, being better, hoping the maze would end. But it never did. Because they didn't want peace. They wanted control over your confusion. But here's what they never saw coming. You were documenting every moment, even when you didn't realize it. Your soul was recording every cold silence, every gaslight, every mask they wore. And now, that data has turned against them. They thought you were just the test subject. But now, you're the evidence, the living proof, a walking archive of their cruelty. And the universe? It's reviewing the footage. Their game is no longer in secret. It's on display. And every experiment ends with results. Guess who's getting studied now? Number 1. They thought you were prey, but you were just a predator in disguise. They didn't show you mercy because they thought you couldn't fight back. Now they're choking on the silence they mistook for surrender. Make no mistake, their cruelty wasn't clumsy. It was confident, too confident. They looked at you and made a judgment. This one won't push back. This one's soft, alone, vulnerable. That's why they denied you mercy. Not because they didn't know better, but because they did and thought they could get away with it. They thought you were powerless, easy, unarmed, and that belief is what gave them the guts to go full-blown reckless with their betrayal. They didn't just cross the line, they danced on it, because they assumed no one was watching. No one would defend you, not even you. That arrogance, that was their real mistake. Here is something you should know. People with inflated egos tend to overestimate their own intelligence and underestimate the strength of others. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it leads them to dangerous delusions about who they can mistreat without consequences. Imagine this: a lion curled up in the grass, still, silent, watching. A hunter steps closer, laughing, calling it tame because it hasn't moved. Then one step too far, and the lion reminds them why silence isn't weakness, it's restraint. That was you, still, watching, holding back. You weren't powerless, you were calculating. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was just the quiet before a shift they could never control. You weren't loud, you weren't reactive, and that's what fooled them. They only respect chaos because that's what they understand. They couldn't read you, so they dismissed you. But the real ones, the chosen ones, they moved different, quiet, focused, patient. And that's the energy they never saw coming. You weren't weak, you were underestimated. Now they're realizing the mercy they refused. That was their last chance to escape the storm, and now the storm has arrived. Number 1, you held up the mirror. They smashed it instead of facing themselves. They didn't hate you for who you were. They hated you for what you revealed. Let's be honest, you didn't do anything to them. You just existed, fully, authentically, truthfully. And that was enough to trigger every wound they never healed. You were never the villain in their story. You were the mirror, and they couldn't stand what they saw staring back. You reflected back their guilt, their shame, their cowardice, and instead of asking themselves why it hurt, they chose to make you the problem. They didn't want clarity, they wanted a distraction, and you became it. Here is a related psychological fact. Projection is a defense mechanism where people disown the darkest parts of themselves and throw those traits onto someone else. It's not rare, it's human. But the ones who never take responsibility, they turn projection into a weapon. Imagine this: someone standing in front of a mirror, furious at the reflection. They start punching the glass, not realizing they're hurting themselves. That's what they did to you. Every jab, every insult, every manipulation. It wasn't really about you. It was about their failure to face themselves. You might have asked, why me? Why did they come for me like that? Because your light exposed their shadows. Your honesty made their lies impossible to ignore. Your strength made their insecurities louder. And instead of evolving, they reacted. Instead of healing, they attacked. Because destruction is easier than transformation. And people who fear truth always choose the shortcut. You were their shadow work. You were the walking trigger they never expected to confront. But instead of using that discomfort as fuel for change, they tried to silence you, bury you, break you. But here's what they missed. Mirrors may crack, but they don't stop reflecting. Now, the reflection they tried to avoid is being forced on them. They can't hide from the parts they refuse to deal with. The universe has turned the spotlight around, and they're being exposed by the very energy they ran from. Your existence was the test, and now their reaction is the evidence. Number 1. They took your kindness for a weapon and ended up wounded by it. You weren't too soft, they were just too used to dealing with hard-hearted people. Your kindness didn't fail you, they did. They mistook your gentleness for a weakness to exploit, not realizing it was the very thing that made you powerful beyond their understanding. You didn't get played because you were naive. You got targeted because you were real, and they had no idea how to handle someone who wasn't wearing a mask. They studied your kindness like a map, not to understand it, but to navigate around it. Every time you forgave, they saw it as permission. Every time you stayed quiet, they took it as proof you wouldn't fight back. They believed your silence was compliance, but really, it was restraint. And restraint is strength, not surrender. Here is something you should know. Manipulators intentionally push empathetic people to their limits because they assume emotional endurance means emotional vulnerability. It's how they test the boundaries without setting off alarms. Imagine this: a locksmith given access to your home, not to fix the lock, but to pick it. That's how they treated your open heart. They didn't enter with respect. They looted the place and blamed you for leaving the door open. But here's where their whole strategy backfired. The same kindness they used as a weapon, it's become their exposure, because the world's watching now, and when people see the contrast between your calm and their chaos, your patience and their provocation, it's not hard to spot the villain. Your kindness didn't make you a victim. It made you the witness. You might have wondered, was I too forgiving, too patient? No, you were principled, you were rooted, you chose peace when others chose power plays. And now that truth, it's louder than every lie they told. It's shining. They expected you to keep absorbing the damage, but you absorbed it, processed it, and alchemized it into evidence. Your kindness wasn't the weakness they thought. It was the trap they walked into, and now they can't escape what it reveals. Number 1. They held the gavel in a fake court. Now the real judge has arrived. They ruled over your life like gods, but forgot that truth always appeals to a higher court. They didn't just judge you, they executed you emotionally, in secret, without evidence, without mercy. You were tried in an invisible courtroom where the only voice that mattered was theirs. No defense, no facts, just their twisted version of reality stamped with finality. Guilty, not because you did wrong, but because your existence didn't serve their story. They appointed themselves judge, jury, and executioner, and you were never given a chance to speak. They sentenced you in silence, behind closed doors, with lies for testimony and ego as law. Justice wasn't the goal. Domination was. They didn't want the truth. They wanted control. Let me tell you something. People who are insecure and power-hungry often create false narratives to feel superior. It's called cognitive distortion, and it's how they convince themselves they're right, even when they're dead wrong. Imagine this: a courtroom where the judge is also the accuser. The jury is a group of mirrors reflecting only their own fears, and the executioner acts before the trial begins. That's the system they built. A kangaroo court, a farce, a performance of justice with no justice at all. You may have asked yourself, how did they twist it all so easily? Why didn't anyone see what was really happening? Because they were loud and you were quiet. They manipulated perception, cast shadows over your name, and smiled while handing down emotional death sentences. But here's what they never expected. Truth has its own courtroom. And that courtroom, it's open now, not ruled by bias, gossip, or pride, but by balance, consequence, universal law. The same hands that moved in secrecy are now being pulled into the light. The real court sees everything, the lies, the setups, the cruel decisions made behind fake smiles, and the verdict isn't pity, it's accountability. What they thought was final is just the beginning. The appeals are over. The sentence is being written in energy, in silence, in karma. They may have walked like gods for a moment, but the fall is always hardest when pride leads the way. The gavel has dropped, and this time it's not in their hands. Number 1, they repeated the hurt like a ritual because breaking you was the goal. This wasn't random rage. It was a script they rehearsed until it tore you apart. Let's stop pretending this was a misunderstanding. What you endured wasn't emotional chaos. It was emotional ritual, repeated, precise, strategic. Every cruel silence, every passive-aggressive jab, every sudden shift from warmth to cold, none of it was by accident. They weren't reacting. They were performing. You weren't in a relationship. You were in a psychological loop. A cycle, a slow-cooked assault on your spirit, executed in stages. You might have thought, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe they're just going through something. But that's the trap. They needed you to stay confused, because confusion is control. Here is an interesting fact. Abusers often use cycles of idealization and devaluation to destabilize their targets. It's called trauma bonding, and it makes victims cling harder to the very person who's hurting them. Imagine this, someone lighting a candle, blowing it out, relighting it again, over and over, until the wick is weak. That's what they did to you, lit you up with false hope, then snuffed you out with cold dismissal. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't stress. It was a ritual to erase your identity. They watched you shrink, and it gave them a twisted satisfaction, not because you were weak, but because your strength threatened their illusion of power. So they chipped away at it in small daily doses, always just enough to keep you off balance, never enough for others to notice. That's how master manipulators move. You may have asked yourself, why did they keep repeating it? Didn't they see it was destroying me? They did see. That was the point. But here's the part they never expected. The same ritual meant to destroy you has become the pattern that exposed them. You now see the moves, the cycle, the setup, and once you see the pattern, it loses its grip. What was meant to condition you into submission has now conditioned you into awareness. And awareness is the end of their ritual. They were consistent in their destruction. Now you'll be relentless in your healing, and this time you're the one in control. Number 1. They're not sorry. They're just afraid the mask is melting. Regret requires a conscience. All they feel is fear because the mirror's finally facing them. Let's strip it down to the truth. What you're seeing in them now isn't remorse. It's not guilt. It's panic, the trembling, the awkward apologies, the sudden attempts to talk or check in. That's not healing, that's damage control. Because they're not afraid of losing you, they're afraid of losing control over you. They never thought you'd figure it out. Never thought you'd survive long enough to connect the dots, gather receipts, and speak your truth out loud. You were supposed to stay quiet, confused, paralyzed by pain. That's what they were counting on. But you didn't just survive, you woke up, and now you see them. Here is an interesting fact. True guilt leads to empathy and repair. But when someone lacks empathy, they don't feel guilt. They feel fear of exposure. That's all this is. Not, I'm sorry for what I did, but I'm scared people are going to find out. Imagine this. A thief who laughed while robbing a house, suddenly shaking when the cameras roll the footage. That's them. They weren't sorry while they inflicted the pain. They were comfortable, empowered, untouchable. Now, they're just scrambling to stay ahead of a storm they created with their own hands. You might be asking, why now? Why the sudden shift in their tone? Because they sense the ground is shifting. The lies aren't sticking. The truth has momentum. The image they built with fake smiles and twisted stories is cracking wide open, and the fallout is real. This fear isn't personal, it's strategic. They don't feel bad for you. They feel threatened by what your voice and your evidence can now do. And the worst part for them? Karma doesn't operate on their schedule. It comes slow, sure, and multiplied. They thought the game was over, but you flipped the board. The storm circling them now? It's not yours to stop. It's not yours to soften. They showed no mercy, and the universe took note. Number 1, they tried to delete you because your existence exposed their lies. When truth threatens a lie, the liar doesn't argue. They try to erase the witness. They didn't come for you because you were weak. They came for you because you were proof. Proof that their polished image was a fraud. Proof that their version of events was hollow. You weren't just in their way. You were a walking contradiction to everything they pretended to be. And that scared them more than anything else. They knew as long as you were visible, breathing, speaking, their lies weren't safe. So they launched a quiet war, not to confront you directly, but to erase you from the narrative altogether. They smeared your name, twisted your words, exaggerated your flaws, all so they could stand untouched in their delusion. Here is an interesting fact. People with manipulative tendencies often engage in character assassination to protect their false narrative. If they can't disprove the truth, they discredit the person carrying it. Imagine this, a painter who spills ink on your canvas, then blames the mess on your brush. That's what they did. They couldn't control your truth, so they tried to make you look unstable, bitter, broken, anything but credible. You may have wondered, why did they fight so hard to silence me? Because your truth doesn't need volume, it needs presence. And your presence alone was a danger to the empire of lies they built brick by brick in the shadows. But here's where it backfires. You didn't fade, you didn't fold, you stayed, and now the same voice they tried to bury is echoing louder than ever. People are watching, listening, connecting the dots. Their carefully crafted script is unraveling, not by force, but by truth. You were never erased. You were preserved, and now you're rising, not as a whisper, but as undeniable evidence. Number 1, you were their final exam, and they failed while smirking. They thought you were a stepping stone. Turns out you were the measuring stick, and they came up short. You didn't just pass through their life, you were sent as a test. Not to punish, but to reveal, a checkpoint, a divine mirror, a chance for them to rise, to choose growth over ego, humility over pride. But they didn't see it that way. They saw you as another person to bend, use, and manipulate, not realizing the one under scrutiny was them. They failed, not just in action, but in intention. They weren't clueless. They were arrogant, full of pride, blinded by the illusion that your loyalty would always outweigh their betrayal. They thought they could twist your kindness like clay and shape it into something that served them. Let me tell you something. Arrogant individuals often overestimate their moral character and underestimate the damage of their behavior. It's a distortion of self-image that blocks accountability and sabotages real connection. Now imagine this: a student who skips every class, mocks the lesson, cheats on the homework, then acts shocked when they fail the final. That's them. They had the test in front of them, you. And instead of showing up with honesty and care, they brought entitlement and control. You gave them trust. They saw it as leverage. You offered understanding. They used it to sharpen their weapons. You stood there as an open door, and they tried to slam it shut behind you and call it victory. But here's what they never expected: that the very test they laughed through is now grading them in real time. And the cost of failing this one? It's not just losing you, it's being exposed by you, held accountable by everything they underestimated. You may have asked yourself, was I wrong for believing in them? No, that belief was their opportunity. They were just too small to rise to it. Now the test is over, the grades are in, and they're sitting in the echo of a lesson they refused to learn. Number 1. They drew first blood. Now the universe is writing the final chapter. Their cruelty was calculated, so is their collapse. Let's get one thing straight. What happened to you didn't just happen. It wasn't carelessness. It wasn't immaturity. It was intent. They walked into your life with a plan: gain control, cause confusion, extract what they could and walk away untouched. They knew what they were doing. And worse, they enjoyed it. Every betrayal, every lie, every moment they chipped away at your spirit. It was deliberate, and they thought they were smart enough, smooth enough, and untouchable enough to get away with it. But they forgot. Nothing in the universe goes unseen. Psychological fact: people with high manipulative tendencies often operate under a false belief that their charm or control can shield them from consequences. That illusion eventually collapses because reality doesn't play favorites. Now imagine this: a clockmaker who sets a trap with perfect precision, only to realize too late that the gears are turning against them. That's what's happening now. The same effort they used to break you is coming back with interest. Their downfall isn't random, it's custom built. The silence you held, it echoed. The pain you endured, it collected weight. And now the energy they poured into destruction is pouring back, one consequence at a time, slowly, sharply, just as intentional as their attacks. You may ask, is this just karma catching up, or am I imagining it? No, you're watching balance restore itself. You're witnessing justice that doesn't scream, it strikes. Not all at once, but precisely, like a storm that studied its target before it hit. They aimed to break you, but ended up activating a process that's unraveling them. Not because you wished it, but because justice doesn't sleep, and energy always returns to sender. So yes, what they did was intentional, but so is what's happening now. And this time, the mirror is facing them. Number 1. They set the fire, and now they're burning in the smoke. They didn't expect to pay the price because they thought they owned the scales. They started the fire thinking they'd never feel the heat. They threw the match, stepped back, and watched you burn with cold detachment, believing no one would ever know, and worse, that you'd never rise again. But the flames they set weren't yours to carry. They were just borrowing time. They didn't just hurt you, they studied you, calculated the cost, or so they thought, and decided you were disposable. But what they didn't account for was the part of you they couldn't see, the part that doesn't die, that doesn't quit, that doesn't need revenge to be redeemed, only truth. Here is a psychological fact. When people view others as emotionally lesser, they justify harm with no guilt. But once exposed, that same superiority complex turns into fear, fast. Why? Because control thrives in secrecy, but dies in exposure. Now imagine this, someone building a house of lies, confident it will last forever, then realizing they built it on land that keeps the receipts. And now the foundation is cracking, not because you fought them, but because you outlived their scheme. You stood still, and the lies started sinking on their own. They're not just losing you, they're losing the version of themselves they tried so hard to protect, the fake one. Their mask is melting in the same fire they lit for you. Their credibility is burning. Their carefully crafted character going up in smoke. You're not the one shaking anymore. They are. Because the energy is returning, precise, measured, and loud. And this time, it has consequences written in the ashes. They thought they could control the story. Now they are the story, and the ending isn't theirs to write anymore. So, Chosen One, let me say it clearly. What they did was intentional, but so is everything that's happening now. You were never weak. You were the warning. The silence they mocked has become the sound of their undoing. Your survival is louder than their cruelty. Your truth, unstoppable. You didn't just make it through, you turned every scar into evidence. Now the balance is restoring itself, slowly, precisely, and with no mercy, just like they showed you. Walk forward knowing this. The reckoning isn't coming, it's here. And this time, you're not the victim, you're the witness.